But I had a seed of anger in my heart at 18. So I got in a little trouble prior to graduation, graduated, but went back to the States, to South Carolina. One of the things that was devastating is the relationship I had with my mother at the time was fragmented, broken. My mother was a very broken person. She was a valedictorian in her high school class, but she had been abused, taken advantage of many years of her life. So as a mother, she struggled. Her mother was brought into our home when I was 6 years old. We lived in Leavenworth, Kansas. During the time we were in Leavenworth, between the ages of 4 and 12 years old for me, Granny Bertha was my resident theologian. She was the bomb. An amazing woman of God, full of life, full of vigor, and full of cuss words. Granny was a good cusser. She could cuss good. Amen. That's where I learned some of my French from Granny. But when we moved to South Carolina, my parents divorced. I had to testify against my mother in a court hearing. That breach, that fragmented time, led to years of me having no communication with my mother. Went to Germany, graduated, came back to the States. I tried to rebuild a relationship with her, but I couldn't. I was very angry. I tried to get in the streets for about a year. In doing so, I witnessed 10 deaths, 10. 3 of the deaths near me, people standing next to me. And I realized the last death, that there was something the enemy meant to do, but God had a plan. Let me fast forward. My life story is going to be a movie because I've seen so much death that I can't count the number. From 1998 until 2009, I lost my whole family. My wife was the last person to die. I nearly lost my mind between 2010 and 2014. My lifeline was this church. I started attending Angela's Temple in 2012, 2013, 2014. I was revived here.
Come on.
Sorry, 20 seconds. I was revived here. And while being revived, I started to feel very compartmentalized. I hated LA because I didn't feel community and I wasn't plugged in here. I was just here. While being here, I started receiving a phone call from a gentleman in Miami who was going to Rochester. I thought he meant New York, but he was in Rochester, Minnesota. He asked me to come. I said no, repeatedly until I prayed. God told me to go to Rochester. I left here April 24th of 2014, and I went to Rochester, Minnesota. I worked for 90 days. In the middle of working, I met a young lady that I can tell you was a part of a dream that I had between May and October of 1997. I dreamt prophetically about this lady and her 2 children. God told me I would meet her. He didn't tell me to marry her. But he showed me this relationship. After 6 months of dating, I didn't want to commit any sin. I'm a man of God. I have been for 28 years. I've been ordained for 28 years. I decided I'm not going to commit sin. I'm going to marry. I married her in August of 2014. Fast forward, the past 8 years I've been in Minnesota. I prospered. I built a home in Minnesota, bought cars, did what you do. And meanwhile, the 13 losses that I had, I didn't process, Pastor Matt. There was no possible way for me to process. In 2021, my adoptive daughter was diagnosed with a brain tumor. It took us the entire year to fight for her life, and we prevailed. In March 1st of 2022, I woke up and the Spirit of God said, go to the hospital. I started praying. I packed a bag. I woke my wife up and I said, we have to go to the hospital. I tested all day. They sent me home. March 2nd, they admitted me. And then they gave me a diagnosis that I never been sick a day in my life. Congestive heart failure, aortic valve disease, leaky heart, you name it, heart murmur, all kinds of stuff. And I remember sitting there looking at the doctors, and while I was contemplative, prayerful, my wife left the room and she started to legally separate. I was admitted into the hospital for 14 days. While admitted, she divorced me. I knew I had to come back to LA. I did. Came back March 14th. And from March to October, I stayed in hotels with the 3 credit cards I had that weren't in her name, but in mine. Long story short, in October, I was at wit's end. I just bought a little vehicle to stay off the street. And a veterans rep said to me, "Have you been to the Dream Center?" And I kind of looked at her. I thought she was trying to be funny. I was like, well, that's my church. What do you mean have I been to the Dream Center? And she says, well, they have a veterans program. And I rejected her. I said, no, they don't. And she said, they do. So she took me to the website and she started to apply for me.
Come on.
And God opened the door.
Yes.
I'm here.
Come on, Walter.
Pastor Matt, I have to tell you as I conclude, I know I've gone over. I'm shaking under the power of God. I've been in a 25-year storm, it feels like to me. And I'm grateful for the time that I've been here and I'll be here, and for the way that God is finally healing me. I realized that the diagnosis was the multiplied effect of loss and grief and not processing. It's all in my body. So I'm processing every day a little bit more. When I heard your testimony about your strokes and everything that you went through, I felt like, it was weird. I literally sat there, in the other building, in that section, and when you started to share, I said, God, I'm home. It was like, it's weird, I don't wish you sickness, but it felt like that he was confirming something to me that I needed to hear. Because I knew I was at home in 2012. But when I came back, I wasn't clear what he wanted to do with me, to be honest. And I felt like it may be time for me to go. My mother passed at 48 years old. My dad at 61, but the military killed my father. So I started to be contemplative when I got here, is this my time? And when you started to, every sermon, every Thursday, and every Saturday until the Sunday started, I have been revived.
Come on.
Come on, let's give Walter a round of applause. Great.